why the public reacted so strongly to voting fairness, and what this says about trust, perception, and emotional attachment. The moment the final voting results appeared, the reaction online exploded into a debate about fairness, legitimacy, and whether the public vote truly reflects the will of the viewers. And what struck me immediately was how emotionally invested people became in defending or questioning the outcome, showing that trust in the process is just as important as the result itself. So I'm curious whether you also felt that emotional tension building throughout the season. What fascinated me was how quickly people shifted from celebrating Ginger's overwhelming win to arguing about voting methods, with some saying online voting gave younger audiences too much advantage, while others claimed the vote would have changed completely if phone voting still existed, revealing how technology shapes perceptions of fairness. And I'd love to know in the comments how you see this shift between generations. As I read through discussions, it became clear that many older viewers felt excluded by the digital-only voting process, interpreting it as a barrier rather than a convenience. And this emotional response reflected a broader theme of how societal transitions from traditional systems to digital systems can make some groups feel left behind, which turned the final into a symbolic moment rather than just an entertainment event. The idea that a contestant could win because of millions of online followers triggered a deep conversation about influence, because some argued that fandoms distort outcomes while others insisted that influence is simply part of modern culture. And this clash revealed how differently generations evaluate what counts as genuine public support. When people questioned whether the vote was fixed, it didn't come from evidence but from emotional discomfort with results that did not match their expectations. And this reaction shows how trust collapses quickly when personal predictions fail, reminding me of how humans often blame systems rather than reassess their assumptions. I noticed a strong pattern. Those who didn't know Ginge before the show often treated their own unfamiliarity as proof that something was unfair, while those who followed him online interpreted the exact same result as entirely predictable, demonstrating how personal experience shapes perception of fairness more than actual numbers. What made this year so interesting was how the public started analyzing not just the contestants, but the voting mechanics themselves, treating the final as a reflection of broader social issues, technology, generational differences, and public trust, all merging into a single emotional conversation that extended far beyond the jungle. The comments saying things like "never heard of him" or "not a celebrity" showed how identity shapes expectations. Older viewers assume fame comes from television, while younger audiences see digital influence as the standard, creating two parallel realities merging into the same vote, which explains why the discussion felt so heated. The claim that online voters from outside the country might have participated using virtual private networks added an extra layer to the debate, because even without evidence, the mere possibility made some viewers uneasy, revealing how digital anonymity can erode confidence even in harmless entertainment contexts. The suggestion that followers who didn't even watch the show might have voted sparked a separate conversation about loyalty, engagement, and whether voting should reflect performance in the jungle or pre-existing popularity. And this question has no simple answer because viewers themselves disagree on the purpose of the show. As I observed the arguments unfold, I realized many people define fairness through emotional alignment. If their favorite did well, the vote was fair. If not, the system was flawed. And this kind of cognitive bias is extremely common in competitive environments, making the debate less about facts and more about personal emotional journeys. Interestingly, the gap between Tom and Ginge fueled more speculation than the result itself, because some viewers believed Tom connected more with traditional audiences and therefore expected a closer finish, while others believed Ginger's widespread digital support made this margin inevitable, revealing how people interpret results based on which community they identify with. What struck me was how viewers used their own ages as reference points. Younger fans joked that older people were out of touch, while older viewers emphasized that digital fame isn't real fame, and this exchange showed how entertainment becomes a battleground for generational identity rather than a neutral voting process. The nostalgia for phone voting says a lot about trust, because older systems feel more tangible and therefore fairer to some people, while digital systems feel easier to manipulate. Highlighting that perception often outweighs reality when it comes to public approval. When people commented that the show should publish voting percentages for trials and eliminations again, it reflected a desire for transparency to rebuild trust, showing that viewers equate openness with fairness even in entertainment contexts where outcomes have no real-world consequences. What made the reaction even more intriguing was how quickly people projected broader societal frustrations onto the voting discussion, using phrases like "the whole thing is fixed," even though they enjoy the show, demonstrating how entertainment often becomes a safe space for expressing frustrations unrelated to the contest. The belief that digital creators have unfair advantage reveals a deeper fear, that older forms of fame are becoming less dominant, and this discomfort creates emotional resistance to outcomes that favor modern influencers, reflecting a larger cultural shift between generations. Some viewers insisted that only traditional celebrities should compete, while others loved the inclusion of online creators, turning the series into a conversation about what celebrity even means anymore. And this debate says more about evolving culture than about the show itself. The moment Ginger's win was announced, the emotional split between expected and shocking reactions reflected how viewers' personal backgrounds shaped their interpretation of the same event, showing how entertainment mirrors the identity of those watching it. People who felt the vote was skewed toward younger audiences often mentioned their own struggles with online systems, which reflects how accessibility impacts participation. And this shows that fairness isn't just about rules, it's about whether people feel able to take part comfortably. The tension surrounding voting legitimacy became a study in how public trust operates, because even when systems are functioning correctly, emotional perception can override rational understanding, turning harmless discussions into heated debates. Interestingly, fans of Tom seemed more focused on emotional storytelling and character growth, while fans of Ginge emphasized humor, authenticity, and relatability, showing how different personality traits attract different demographic groups. The claim that his followers voted even if they didn't watch reveals a belief that loyalty should come from performance rather than pre-existing popularity. Yet, in reality, public voting shows have always combined both, making this season a reminder that fairness is rarely defined the same way by everyone. When people argued that millions of followers distort results, they overlooked the fact that many viewers discovered Ginge for the first time and voted for him based solely on what they saw, showing that the narrative is more nuanced than some assume. The emotional energy around the final made it clear that the show is more than entertainment. It is a mirror reflecting how people think about influence, voice, identity, and community, and this season amplified those themes more than any before it. What I found compelling was how many older viewers eventually supported Ginge even if they didn't know him initially, proving that behavior in the camp mattered more than reputation, and showing that trust can be built quickly when authenticity is visible. The argument that phone voting would have changed the outcome reveals how people interpret technology through the lens of their own comfort levels, making this a psychological conversation rather than a technical one. People praising Tom for his beautiful soul and sincerity contrasted sharply with comments saying Ginge brought families together, demonstrating two very different kinds of emotional resonance that naturally lead to different forms of loyalty. When younger viewers laughed at older comments claiming they never heard of him, it highlighted how awareness is no longer universal across age groups, making fame a fragmented concept rather than a shared one, which influenced how people interpreted the final. The idea that the Final Four all deserved to be there shows that despite disagreements, viewers found emotional satisfaction in the cast overall, highlighting that the controversy was less about individuals and more about perceptions of the voting system. What surprised me most was how many viewers took the result personally, interpreting it as a signal about cultural change rather than just a competition ending, which shows how deeply identity shapes entertainment reactions. As people continued debating fairness long after the finale, it became clear that trust, perception, and emotional connection will always outweigh numerical results, turning this season into a psychological case study in how modern viewers interpret outcomes through the lens of their own experiences. The reaction that erupted after the finale revealed something profound about human behavior, because people don't respond only to results, but to how results align with their expectations. And when the outcome challenges those expectations, the mind instinctively searches for explanations, which is why so many viewers began discussing voting systems rather than simply accepting the public decision. One of the most striking psychological patterns was how quickly people shifted from talking about contestants' personalities to questioning the fairness of the process, showing that when emotional investment is high, logic often becomes secondary to the need for a narrative that justifies how individuals feel. So I'm genuinely curious whether you felt this shift happening in the online atmosphere.